Hey, how's it going YouTube? Welcome to another review video, except this time I am going to be covering a game that isn't a JRPG, or a game that is made by a AAA gaming company like Square Enix or Bandai Namco. Instead, it's developed by an indie developer called Yummy Yummy Tummy, and co-developed by another indie developer, MintSphere. Yummy Yummy Tummy was a studio that only focused on educational games for children up until the release of Fallen Legion, and MintSphere seemed to have focused solely on mobile games. Before I go any further, I should mention that this video is kinda sponsored. I'm not getting paid to do this review, but I did receive a free PS4 review copy of this game, Fallen Legion: Sins of an Empire. So with that in mind, if that doesn't discredit my review, let's continue. Fallen Legion's story is divided into two games, Sins of an Empire for PS4 and Flames of Rebellion for PS Vita, which I have not played. Flames of Rebellion follows the story of Legatus Laendur in an attempt to overthrow the royal family and take control of the ruling empire. Sins of an Empire follows Princess Cecille in her journey to restoring her empire's former glory. Each game will focus mainly on their own characters, so it's not required for you to play both games. However, there are some overlap, and the stories are connected, so being exposed to both games will give the story a more complete feel. For example, when I play Sins of an Empire, Legatus has a few scenes in the game, but the reasoning for his actions were unknown. I would imagine Flames of Rebellion would be the same, except with Princess Cecille instead. The art style and music are done very well for an indie developer. The scenery and characters were visually appealing, and I never grew tired of visiting a level or watching my characters fight. Unfortunately, the story isn't impressive, as it is extremely linear and the characters lack development despite there only being 3 main characters, not including Legatus since he's the focus of Flames of Rebellion. You have the Grimoire, Maurice, and the heroine of our story, Princess Cecille. For me, the Grimoire's sarcastic and demeaning attitude towards Princess Cecille was the most entertaining part of the story. Other than that, the rest of the interactions between characters were not meaningful. Characters' backstories were pretty much non-existent, and as a result, all the relationships hold very little weight. Princess Cecille is the heroine of the story, but it was very hard to connect with her since she's very generic and lacks depth. Since I could not connect with the heroine, it's impossible to care about the rest of the cast. Broadly speaking, Fallen Legion is probably one of the most linear and repetitive games I have ever played, with the most linear being Oregon Trail. I think this is probably the biggest drawback of the game. During gameplay, you navigate between what is essentially nodes in the overworld. When you visit a node, Princess Cecille will automatically run through a level to the end. A few nodes will contain only dialogue between characters where she stops at each person and talks a little for some story development. 90% of other nodes contains about 7 continuous battle encounters one after the other, with some dialogue sprinkled in. After completing the battles, the level will be complete and the next node will be discovered. Now it's time to do that all over again. This repeats until you beat the game. The very few side quests that are available follow the same structure, so it doesn't offer any relievement from the repetitiveness. There isn't much you can do if you want to take a break from the main story unless you want to replay stages by traveling back to previously completed nodes. There are also no shops on the overworld, so customization will come from selecting your party of 3, choosing death blows, and equipping up to 3 gemstones, which grants different bonuses to your fighters. The majority of gameplay will be spent in battle, which is fortunately where all the fun is. The battle system was a tad boring in the beginning when customization was lacking, and I was still trying to get a hold of learning the game. But once I understood and improved at the battle mechanics, it became much more enjoyable. Battles consisted of semi-controlling 3 fighters called Exemplars, and casting spells occasionally with Princess Cecille, which is very reminiscent of Valkyrie Profile's battle system. Battles are very simple as you only have a few possible actions. You can attack by using AP points, defend, or use a power-up item. However, there are some mechanics that make the battle system more complicated than it appears and hard to master. What really made the battle system stand out was perfect block and link attacks. You can nullify damage and restore AP by blocking about a second before an attack lands. Of course, the more enemies there are, the more attacks there will be, so blocking successive attacks in a row becomes very difficult, but very rewarding if pulled off. Link attacks are ways to chain attacks to increase damage in addition to having extra bonuses. Linked attacks can also be triggered after a perfect block by attacking within a few frames after the block. Mastering perfect blocks and link attacks will allow you to deal even more damage as the damage modifier increases. The longer you can keep your combos going, the higher the damage modifier will be. During battles, you will also sometimes be required to make decisions on current events in the kingdom. This may be as simple as repairing a bridge, supporting a specific prince or legislation, or executing people. Determining what action you should take will affect certain things during your gameplay, but it will never affect the main story. You can make poor choices and this will not affect your ending. Instead, choices will unlock stronger exemplars, death blows, new areas, items, and affect morale. When you make a choice, your party will always be healed a certain amount depending on your morale, and receive a buff that is determined by your action. You are able to obtain more powerful buffs for actions by obtaining something called tributes from people that you help or by completing objectives. I have one tiny complaint and one real complaint about choices. My tiny complaint is that sometimes it's not obvious what an action entails. For instance, a choice has to be made on how to handle a contaminated shipment of cabbage. Do I destroy it, quarantine it, or experiment? The first two choices are obvious, but what does experiment mean? Am I feeding it to people and seeing what happens, or am I studying it to make a bioweapon? Since choices don't really matter, this isn't a big deal, but it did bother me in the beginning. The real issue I have with the choice system is that they had a very powerful system here that could have potentially improved the story and gameplay by adding another level of complexity to it, such as developing relationships, introducing more characters, and actually having to manage an empire with consequences for poor choices? This could have made the overworld more useful besides traveling to the next location or saving my game. Instead, we have choices that hold no weight as there are no real consequences. Sure, a town may be overrun by bandits or I lose support from a prince, but does it matter? I'll never see that town again and support from a prince means nothing. As a result, I will always choose the choice that gives me the most useful buff unless I know a certain choice is needed to unlock an exemplar or new areas. Alright, that's all the points I wanted to get through. So, is this game worth it? Did I enjoy my experience? Overall, yeah, I had fun playing Fallen Legion: Sins of an Empire. However, whether this game is worth it is another thought entirely. The story is linear and weak due to its unrelatable characters, and having the story split into two parts also caused more harm than good. Gameplay outside of battle is also very linear as there isn't much you can do besides move from level to level and tinker with your gems. If you think you are able to look past this, the battle system is where this game truly shows what it's made of. Attacks, perfect blocks, death blows, and the combo system made battles very interactive and fun. I never grew tired of the battle system. Gaining powerful spells to use for Princess Cecille was also fun as not many foes can withstand the onslaught of some of her more powerful spells. The first playthrough of the story took me about 8 to 10 hours to complete, so the game is relatively short. Since I enjoyed the battle system, I actually spent even more time playing the game. I didn't mind going through a second time to unlock more exemplars, death blows, and being more of a tyrant this time around. The pricing is also fairly cheap as well, with each game only costing $20 or $30 if you get the bundle. I don't necessarily consider this a bad game, otherwise I would have never completed it. However, I do think that if I had to pay $20 for this game, I'd be pretty disappointed. While the battle system is great, I don't think it's good enough to hold Fallen Legion up on its own. Yummy Yummy Tummy and Mint Sphere have definitely come very far and created something with a lot of potential in just a tiny span of 2 to 3 years. But the gaming world is not so forgiving. I really wanted to give this game a better review as I will always root for the indie companies, and I enjoyed the battle system, but I need something more to work with. If you can accept that this game isn't highly budgeted and can look past the flaws I mentioned in my review, I think Fallen Legion could be a game that is enjoyed. Otherwise, it's probably best if you looked elsewhere for your action RPG needs.